So today I want to talk about the number one thing that is holding your street photography back, and my street photography as well, to be honest. At first, when I was planning to talk about this, I thought it was going to be a topic addressed purely to beginners, the number one thing that holds beginners street photography back. But as I started to think about it, I realised that actually this is the thing that holds most experienced street photographers back as well. It's not just something that impacts beginners, but everyone throughout their career. The reason I know that is not because I'm an expert. I would call myself mediocre or average. I'm improving all the time. But I've listened to interviews from professional street photographers, professional documentarian photographers really, and they all seem to touch on this aspect in different ways as well. So what I'm going to talk about today then is how this affects beginners. It may affect you as well if you're more experienced. And then also how it affects more experienced photographers later on as well. So you may have guessed what it is already, and that is fear. Fear is the number one thing that holds your street photography back. So I want you to do a little thought experiment with me, and then we'll move on to talking more directly about it. Now this thought experiment is to imagine that you had absolutely no fear in photography. There was nothing to be worried about. How would you take photos then? I think most of us would spend our time, we'd try multiple different shots, we'd get closer than we'd feel comfortable with normally, so we'd frame it in the right way, and we'd always be in the right position, try different things, spend more time shooting. We wouldn't give up with an average shot. We'd keep going until we got the shot. So I think that's one extreme. And then let's switch to the other extreme. Imagine that fear just completely dominated every decision you made about photography. And I imagine that you probably just wouldn't take any photos. I mean, what if the person reacted badly on the street? Or what if you shared it online and people were really critical of it? What if you got injured while you're out on the street? I mean, all these things are possible. So before we continue, join in with this thought experiment. Where would you put yourself on that line? Let's say 1 is where fear doesn't affect you at all, or 0 maybe even. And then 10, where you're completely dominated by fear. Fear affects everything you do, every decision you make. I think if you're like me, then probably you move up and down this scale depending on the day, depending on what else is going on in your life, depending on what happens as well out on the street. On an occasion earlier this summer, I was actually closer to 9, I would say, where fear was dominating everything I did. That was because I was going through some pretty bad stuff actually, and so fear was really affecting my mind, and it meant that I didn't take any photos because I was just paralysed by this fear. However, usually I'd say I'm actually more closer to like 6, 7, 8. When I'm shooting more, the more I'm into it, the more I'm doing it, the closer I get to 8, 9, 10. I don't think I've ever really felt 10, but sometimes on the street I would say I'm at a 9, where I'm really confident, just going out, getting really close to people, no problem. So I think it's an important thing as a beginner to help overcome that fear. And you may think that you're overcoming it, but really there's usually more to go. And if you can overcome that, then you'll take the shots that you want to take. Now, when it comes to more experienced photographers, fear is a bit more tricky and nuanced. Often you've overcome that initial fear of what is someone going to do to you on the street? Are you safe on the street? Because you've experienced it enough and you've learned that actually people are generally pretty good and they're not going to attack you or be very critical or whatever. They may think you're a weirdo, but that doesn't really matter in the long run. But then you get to the point where you're looking at doing projects, or you're looking at submitting your portfolio for review, or you're getting critiques online, or you're sharing photos and you get worried about what other people are going to think of you. Now, maybe this is less of a factor for you, but I'm sure there have been some opportunities which you've looked at and you've wondered, should I do this or not? And fear comes into play there. So it could be that you want to enter a project and then you have that voice in your head which says, but you're not good enough. Your photos aren't as good as these other people. Why even bother? And that's fear. It's there to it holds you back. It prevents you from taking that risk. And maybe you're right. Maybe you will get feedback which is like, oh, this just isn't good enough. But maybe you won't. And if you do get that feedback that this just isn't good enough, does it really matter? Okay, maybe you've spent some money entering this competition and lost it, but it doesn't really hurt. It doesn't really kill you. It doesn't really harm you physically. You're still alive. You can still carry on. You can submit again. So I think actually when you look at it, fear is one of those things which really does dominate most people's decisions. So if you want to be more successful in photography, if you want to get further in street photography, then you have to overcome that initial fear on the street, and you also have to overcome that fear constantly. So that's some of the stuff that I'm dealing with at the moment. I've got a project which I want to do, and I've got to do some travelling if I want to do it. It's more of a documentarian project than a street photography project. And so I've got to contact some people to ask them, can I photograph where they are? Can I follow them around and photograph those things? I've got to contact people in different languages. So these are all things which are affecting me and holding me back. The fear is holding me back from contacting those people. It's really stupid. I might as well just give it a go and try and see. And maybe they will think I'm a weirdo, they don't want to contact me, but probably not. And if they do, who cares? It doesn't matter in the long run. So I hope this is useful for you. I hope this has helped you identify fear in your street photography. What I'd love is if fear has held you back or is holding you back in your street photography, please leave a comment below sharing how it's holding you back. And if you've liked this video, please like the video and subscribe so you don't miss another video from Street Talks.